The Galactic Assembly Chamber had witnessed countless pleas over its 900-year history. Representatives from 42 species gathered in the gleaming hall, their seats arranged in concentric circles around a central platform where petitioners made their cases. Today, that platform held a creature barely half the size of the smallest assembly member, their crystalline skin refracting the chamber's light into pale rainbows. Shim had been preparing this speech for 12 days. He represented what remained of the Kashari Council, though calling it a council felt like mockery when only 3 of the 15 members still lived free. The others had been taken. Shim's voice, naturally melodious due to his species' crystalline larynx, cracked with exhaustion as he spoke. For 3 cycles, the Draxian sovereignty has raided our settlements. They take our people in the night. They claim we are property under their covenant of sovereignty. We have begged them to stop. We have offered tribute. They only take more. The assembly listened with the polite attention they gave all petitioners. The Palaxian representative, a tall being with silver skin and too many joints, leaned forward with practiced sympathy. The Vorath delegate, blob-like and methodical, recorded everything with mechanical precision. 17,000 Kashari have been taken, Shim continued. His hands trembled. Our homeworld had 50,000 people before the raids began. Now we number barely 30,000. They force us to sing in resonance chambers. Our voices produce crystals they sell for... He paused, his translator struggling with the amount. Millions of credits per kilogram. They work us until our throats shatter. Children are separated from parents. Some never stop singing until they die. Silence filled the chamber. Not the silence of shock, but of careful political calculation. Every representative present was performing the same mental arithmetic, weighing the cost of intervention against the benefit, measuring the Draxian sovereignty's military strength against the Kashari's strategic value. The Palaxian ambassador spoke first, his voice gentle and regretful. The assembly extends its deepest sympathies to the Kashari people. However, we must acknowledge that the Draxian sovereignty is a recognized governmental entity with sovereign rights over their territorial claims and internal policies. While the Assembly personally finds these practices distasteful, we cannot legally intervene in matters that fall under sovereign jurisdiction. Shim's crystalline skin dulled. He knew what was coming. The Vorath representative added their analysis. Economic modeling suggests military intervention would require a coalition of at least 8 member species. Projected casualties range from 40,000 to 200,000 across all involved parties. The Kashari population does not exceed 50,000. From a utilitarian perspective, intervention results in net negative survival outcomes. One by one, representatives offered variations of the same response. Too costly, too risky, too complicated. The Thoraxian delegate suggested lodging a formal complaint. The Quellian ambassador proposed economic sanctions that everyone knew would never pass a vote. The Mordathi representative actually fell asleep during the Kashari's testimony. Shim stood on the platform, growing smaller with each polite refusal. 3 hours ago, he had held hope. Now, he tasted only ashes. "Please," he said, abandoning his prepared remarks. "We are dying. Is there no one who will help us?" The Palaxian ambassador checked his schedule. "We will reconvene in 40 days to discuss potential diplomatic outreach to the Draxian sovereignty." A strongly worded statement may be appropriate. The Assembly recognizes the Kashari's right to petition for 40 days? Shim's voice cracked high and sharp, producing a discordant tone that made several representatives wince. "In 40 days, another 1,000 of my people will be gone. In 40 days, there may be no Kashari left to save." But the session was already ending. Representatives filed out, some genuinely sympathetic, most already thinking about their next appointment. The galaxy had many problems. The Kashari were just one more tragedy in an uncaring universe. Shim returned to his ship alone. His aide had been taken 6 days ago. He sat in the pilot's chair and stared at the communication panel. The assembly had been his last hope, the culmination of everything his people could sacrifice to send one representative to beg for mercy. He had one option left: the broad-spectrum distress beacon. It was technically illegal without assembly authorization, but Shim had stopped caring about assembly rules. He recorded a simple message: "This is Shim of the Kashari. We are a small people. The Draxians are enslaving us. The galaxy calls this an internal matter. We call it genocide. We have perhaps 100 days before our species is extinct. If anyone can hear this, if anyone cares, please, we are dying. Someone, anyone. He broadcasted across every frequency his ship could access, then slumped in his chair and wept. The message propagated across space at light speed, reaching monitoring stations, merchant vessels, military outposts, and diplomatic listening posts throughout known space. Most recipients deleted it. Some forwarded it to relevant authorities who filed it appropriately. A few felt genuine sadness before moving on with their day. And then, 14 days after broadcast, it reached Earth. The human diplomatic station orbiting Assembly Station Concordia was new, barely 8 months old. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Assembly 2 years prior, still learning the complex web of protocols, traditions, and unspoken rules that governed interstellar politics. Junior analyst Mika Haverford was working the night shift when the Kashari distress call came through. She listened to it 3 times, her expression growing darker with each replay. Then she did something that would change galactic history. She flagged it Priority 1 and sent it directly to Earth's military command with a single line. They're enslaving people. Thoughts? The message reached Admiral Tyson Callahan 26 hours later. He was in his office on Luna Station, reviewing deployment schedules for the Outer System Defense Fleet. Callahan was 54 years old, with gray threading through his close-cropped hair and a face that had seen 3 wars. He had joined Earth's Navy when humanity was still fighting itself, back before first contact, before the assembly, before humanity learned it was just one small species in a crowded galaxy. He watched Shim's message, listened to the crystalline voice crack with desperation, read the assembly's response, then he pulled up everything humanity had on the Draxian sovereignty. What he found made his jaw tighten. The Draxians were a reptilian species, militaristic and expansionist. They'd been in the assembly for 200 years. Their covenant of sovereignty was exactly what it sounded like, a legal framework that classified certain species as property. The assembly had made noise about it 40 years ago, then quietly dropped the issue when the Draxians threatened to leave the assembly and take their considerable military with them. Callahan pulled up the recordings of Kashari and Draxian facilities, black market footage, probably from defectors or smugglers. What he saw made his hands curl into fists. Kashari in cages barely large enough to stand, neural collars around their necks delivering shocks if they stopped singing. Children, impossibly small, their voices hoarse from overuse. Processing centers where Kashari were sorted like cargo. Resonance chambers where they sang until crystalline formations grew in their throats, which were then harvested before the cycle began again. Callahan had seen evil before. Earth's own history was soaked in it. But seeing it happen now, in real time, with the galaxy's knowledge and consent, ignited something cold and furious in his chest. He opened a secure line to the Joint Chiefs. We need to talk about the Kashari situation. The meeting lasted 6 hours. Some urged caution. Earth was new to galactic politics, and unilateral military action could isolate them diplomatically. Others argued humanity had no legal standing to intervene in Draxian sovereign territory. Admiral Helena Rodriguez, head of Special Operations, cut through the debate. We've spent 200 years on Earth saying never again about slavery and genocide. Now we're in space, we have the power to actually do something, and we're worried about permission? From the same people who sat there filing reports while children get worked to death? Callahan's response was equally direct. I'm not asking for a debate on whether we act. I'm telling you we are acting. The question is scope and timeline. By the end of the meeting, Earth's position was clear. They would deliver an ultimatum to the Draxian sovereignty, release all Kashari within 48 hours or face military intervention. No negotiation, no assembly mediation, just a simple choice. The Joint Chiefs authorized deployment of 3 battle groups, 34 warships, including the dreadnought Indomitable, Callahan's flagship. Authorization for full combat operations, rules of engagement, any Draxian forces protecting slave facilities were considered hostile. Earth's ambassador to the assembly delivered the ultimatum at 9 a.m. station time. The Palaxian ambassador nearly choked on his morning beverage. You cannot simply declare war without assembly consensus. There are procedures, protocols. We're not declaring war, the human ambassador replied calmly. We're declaring that slavery is a crime against sapient life, and we will treat it as such. The Draxians can comply and avoid conflict, or they can refuse and face the consequences. This is madness. The Assembly will sanction you for this unilateral action. File the paperwork. Meanwhile, our fleet launches in 6 hours. The Draxians received the ultimatum with amusement. Overlord Kreth Vaxmaran, supreme ruler of the Draxian sovereignty, held the human message in his clawed hand and laughed. Humans were the youngest species in the Assembly, barely past their own planetary conflicts. They had no understanding of galactic power dynamics. He didn't bother responding to the ultimatum. Let the humans learn their place. The 48-hour deadline passed at 9:00 a.m. on the third day. At 9:01 a.m., Admiral Callahan gave the order. All ships begin jump sequence. Destination, Black Veil Nebula. We're going to remind the galaxy what happens when you enslave people. The Black Veil Nebula earned its name from the dark purple clouds that made conventional sensors nearly useless. It was perfect for hiding things you didn't want found. Draxian intelligence believed processing complex Theta 9 was completely secret, hidden in the nebula's electromagnetic chaos. They were wrong. Human signals intelligence had been tracking Draxian communications for months, ever since Earth joined the Assembly. When Shim's message arrived, it took analysts only 3 days to cross-reference shipping routes, energy signatures, and encrypted transmissions. Theta 9's location was pinpointed to within 1,000 kilometers. Captain Rafe Domingo stood on the bridge of the UTNS Liberator, an assault carrier designed for rapid deployment and close combat. His strike force consisted of 5 ships, the Liberator, 2 destroyers, and 2 corvettes. Small enough to navigate the nebula, powerful enough to handle whatever they found. Rafe was 37, with dark eyes that rarely showed emotion and a reputation for getting impossible jobs done. He'd earned his commission during the Mars Rebellion, leading boarding actions against separatist ships. Now he was about to turn those skills against slavers. We have the complex on sensors, his tactical officer reported, confirming 3 Draxian warships in defensive positions, Crimson Talon-class frigates. And the complex itself, massive, biosigns consistent with approximately 3,000 Kashari. Energy signatures suggest active resonance chambers. Rafi felt his jaw tighten. 3,000, children, families, people who'd been stolen from their homes and worked until they broke. All ships, battle stations, weapons free on my mark. Lieutenant Castellan, prep your Marines. We breach in 12 minutes. The Draxian frigates detected the human ships 8 minutes before contact. Their commander, a veteran of 40 years, followed standard protocols, challenged the unknown vessels, demand identification, prepare defensive formations. He expected another trade ship that had wandered into restricted space. A warning, perhaps a small fine, and they'd move on. The human response was immediate and devastating. The Liberator dropped out of combat approach at knife-fighting range, already firing. Magnetic accelerator cannons, MAC rounds traveling at 14,000 kilometers per second, punched through the lead frigate's shields like they weren't there. Missiles followed, swarming from launch tubes in coordinated patterns that overwhelmed Draxian point defense. The Draxian commander had 4 seconds to realize this wasn't a lost trader. Then, his ship's reactor took a direct hit and went critical. The 2 remaining frigates tried to maneuver, but human destroyers had already bracketed them. Where Draxian tactics relied on broadside energy exchanges and calculated targeting, humans fought with overwhelming coordinated fire and zero hesitation. Both frigates were crippled within 90 seconds. Frigates neutralized, Tactical reported. Minimal damage to our ships. Good. Get us docked with that complex. Marines, you're up. Lieutenant Derek Castellan led the first breach. His team of 40 Marines hit the complex's primary airlock with shaped charges, cutting through in seconds. Draxian guards inside barely had time to raise their weapons before human weapon fire cut them down. Derek had spent 8 years in the Corps, including 2 tours in the Belt Wars. He was methodical, professional, and absolutely ruthless when the situation demanded. This situation demanded it. Team 1, secure the control center. Team 2, locate the Kashari. Team 3, with me, we're finding whoever runs this place. The complex was a nightmare made real. Corridors lined with cells, each holding 4 to 6 Kashari wearing neural collars. Resonance chambers where Kashari were forced to sing for hours, their voices producing crystalline formations that grew in their throats. Processing areas where crystals were harvested surgically, often without anesthetic. Sergeant Nina Kowalski found the children's section. Keshari juveniles, some barely old enough to speak, locked in smaller cells. Their crystalline skin was dull from malnutrition, their voices hoarse from overuse. One child, impossibly small, looked up at Nina with eyes that held no hope. Nina had seen combat. She'd lost friends. She considered herself hardened, but this broke something in her. "We're getting you out," she said softly, her hands working to override the cell's lock. "All of you, I promise." The child, Nina learned later her name was Prill, didn't respond. She'd learned not to hope. Derek's team found the complex's administrator in a control room, attempting to purge files. He was a Draxian, large and reptilian, with scales that marked him as high caste. When he saw the humans, he reached for a weapon. Derek shot him in the shoulder before he could complete the draw. The Draxian collapsed, hissing in pain and shock. "Where are the override codes for the neural collars?" Derek asked calmly. "You have no authority here. This is Draxian sovereign territory, operating under legitimate—" Derek shot him in the other shoulder. "I asked about override codes. I can keep shooting locations until you run out of limbs." The Draxian provided the codes. Over the next 40 minutes, Marines systematically liberated every Kashari in the complex. Neural collars came off, cell doors opened, medical teams began treating injuries and malnutrition. Some Kashari couldn't believe it was real, others wept. A few tried to sing in gratitude, but their voices were too damaged. Prill watched as Sergeant Nina Kowalski removed her collar, the device clicking open to reveal raw, burned skin underneath. The small Kashari touched her throat tentatively as if expecting pain. "Why?" Prill asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why do you help us?" Nina knelt down, meeting Prill's eyes. "Because slavers don't get to exist while humans do. That's not how this works." The complex's Draxian commander demanded to speak with the humans' leader. Derek brought him to Captain Ray Fay, who was overseeing the evacuation onto human ships. "This is an act of war," the Draxian snarled. "You have violated sovereign territory, destroyed military vessels, killed Draxian citizens." "You enslaved children," Rafi interrupted, his voice flat. "You worked them until they physically broke. You treated sapient beings like machinery." He leaned forward. "In human terms, that makes you lucky. 100 years ago, we'd have burned this complex to the ground with you in it. Instead, you get to stand trial." "Trial? By whose authority?" "By the authority of not being a slaver. If that's not enough legal justification for you, feel free to file a complaint with the Assembly. I'm sure they'll get to it in 40 days. The complex was emptied of Kashari within 3 hours. 3,000 survivors, some barely alive, all finally free. The complex itself was rigged with charges and detonated, leaving nothing but debris in the nebula. As the Liberator jumped back to rendezvous with Admiral Callahan's main fleet, Nina sat with Prill in the medical bay. The young Kashari was being treated for malnutrition, chronic pain, and throat damage from forced singing. "What happens now?" Prill asked. "Now we find the rest of your people, and anyone who stands in the way," Nina's expression hardened. "They get to learn what happens when you test human patience." The Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session 18 hours after the Black Veil raid. The chamber was in chaos. Overlord Kreth Vaxmoran himself attended via hologram, his reptilian features twisted with rage. "The humans have committed an unprovoked act of war against the Draxian sovereignty. They destroyed military vessels, killed Draxian citizens, and stole valuable property from a legally operating facility. The Assembly must condemn this action immediately and impose sanctions." The Palaxian ambassador, secretly relieved someone was finally addressing the Kashari situation, but politically unable to say so, nodded gravely. "While the Assembly sympathizes with the Kashari's plight, we cannot condone unilateral military action without proper authorization. Humanity must answer for these violations of Assembly law." The debate raged for hours. Some species agreed with the Draxians, setting a precedent for military intervention in sovereign territory was dangerous. Others privately admired humanity's directness, but couldn't say so publicly. The Vorath calculated scenarios. The Thraxians proposed committees. Earth's representative, Ambassador Cole Fletcher, waited patiently for his turn to speak. When recognized, he stood slowly. The Draxian sovereignty has enslaved over 17,000 Kashari. They torture them for profit. They separate families. They kill children through overwork. The Assembly has known about this for 3 cycles. You've filed reports, formed committees, written strongly worded statements. And while you debated, the Kashari died. We understand your emotion, the Palaxian ambassador began, but there are proper channels. We used your channels, Fletcher interrupted. We appealed to the Assembly for authorization to act. We were told intervention wasn't economically viable, so we stopped asking permission. You cannot simply ignore Assembly law. Watch us, Fletcher's voice hardened. Earth recognizes the enslavement of sapient beings as a crime that supersedes sovereign authority. We will oppose it with military force, with or without Assembly approval. If that violates your laws, then your laws are broken. Overlord Vaxmoran's hologram flickered with anger. You threaten the entire Draxian sovereignty over a few thousand primitives? You will lose this war, human. Fletcher smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. We've already won, Overlord. We freed 3,000 Kashari from Theta 9, and that was just the first raid. The chamber went silent. According to our intelligence, you operate 17 slave processing facilities across 6 systems. We know the location of all of them, and over the next 30 days, we're going to visit each one. You can defend them, negotiate, or surrender. Choose quickly. The Assembly erupted. This was madness. How dare humanity threaten a sovereign species? This set dangerous precedents. What if other species decided to ignore Assembly law? But beneath the outrage, a different current flowed. In the halls after the session, diplomats whispered. Some species had their own grievances with the Draxians. Others had been victims of Assembly inaction. A few began to wonder if humanity had the right idea. On Earth, Admiral Callahan received the Assembly's formal condemnation with indifference. His response to the Joint Chiefs was simple. They can condemn us all they want. Meanwhile, we've got 16 more facilities to hit. The campaign that followed became known as the Liberation War, though humanity never formally declared war. They simply identified Draxian slave facilities and eliminated them with surgical precision. Commander Pierce Donovan led the assault on Processing Center Gamma-14 in the Valtrix system. The Draxians had reinforced security after Black Veil, installing automated defenses and doubling the guard force. Pierce's response was to hack the facility's own security systems through a commercially available service port. Draxian cybersecurity was apparently designed to prevent outside access, not inside manipulation. Within minutes, Pierce locked Draxian guards in their own barracks while Marines extracted 2,400 Kashari. By the time Draxian reinforcements arrived, the humans were gone, leaving only a looped message. The Keshari are people, not property. Regards, humanity. Captain Rafi hit 3 more facilities over the next 14 days, each raid more efficient than the last. The pattern became routine. Jump in, overwhelm defenses, extract Kashari, destroy the facility, jump out. Draxian attempts to intercept were frustrated by human speed and coordination. They fought like nothing the Draxians had encountered. No honor duels, no calculated exchanges, just overwhelming violence of action. The Draxians escalated. If humans wanted war, they'd get it. The Battle of Draxus Secundus began at 4:17 a.m. station time when Draxian commander Zethus Kalduran's fleet dropped out of FTL directly in the path of Admiral Callahan's 12-ship task force. Zethus commanded 40 warships, including the massive dreadnought Iron Dominion. He'd been fighting for the sovereignty for 35 years and had never lost a battle. These humans, barely out of their own system, thought they could challenge Draxian military might. He would teach them the error of that assumption. All ships, battle formation Delta 7, Zethus ordered. We'll give them a chance to surrender. When they refuse, we destroy them systematically. Show these primitives how civilized species conduct warfare. Admiral Callahan stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching the Draxian fleet arrange itself into their traditional formation, heavy ships in the center, lighter vessels in wings, preparing for broadside exchanges at medium range. "They really are fighting like it's the 18th century, his tactical officer observed. "Then let's drag them into the 23rd, Callahan replied. "All ships weapons free. Bring us in close. I want to be boarding the Iron Dominion within 20 minutes. The Draxian fleet opened fire at 40,000 kilometers with energy weapons, plasma bolts and particle beams designed for long-range dueling. Most missed as human ships accelerated at angles Draxian sensors didn't anticipate. Those that hit were absorbed by human shields or glanced off armor. The human response came at 15,000 kilometers. Mac rounds punched through Draxian shields, followed by missile swarms that split into multiple warheads. 3 Draxian frigates were destroyed in the opening exchange. Zethus stared at his displays in shock. Impossible! Their weapons shouldn't penetrate our shields at that range. Their weapons aren't designed for conventional energy exchanges, his science officer reported. They're using kinetic projectiles at relativistic speeds. Our shields are optimized for energy weapons. Adapt our shield frequencies. Return fire. But the humans weren't following conventional warfare patterns. Instead of staying at range, they closed to point-blank distances where Draxian heavy weapons couldn't track them. Human destroyers tore into Draxian capital ships like wolves harrying bears. Missiles launched from 1,000 kilometers tracked through evasive maneuvers with frightening accuracy. The Indomitable charged directly at the Iron Dominion, taking fire from a dozen Draxian ships. Callahan's dreadnought was hit repeatedly, shields flickering, armor scorching, but it never slowed. "Sir, we've taken damage to sections 7 through 12, the damage control officer reported. Casualties on deck 8, shields at 40%. "Keep us on course," Callahan ordered. "All power to forward weapons. Target the Iron Dominion's shield generators." The Indomitable's main battery opened fire at 2,000 kilometers. 4 Mac rounds, each massing 600 kilograms and traveling at 14,000 kilometers per second, hit the Iron Dominion's forward shields in a precise pattern. The shields collapsed. "Boarding teams, stand by," Callahan said calmly. Zethus saw the human dreadnought approaching and finally understood what was happening. "They're going to ram us. All ships concentrate fire on that vessel. Destroy it before—" The Indomitable hit the Iron Dominion at 400 meters per second, its reinforced prow punching into the Draxian flagship's hull. Explosive charges detonated milliseconds before impact, blowing holes for boarding teams to pour through. Lieutenant Derek Castellan led the first wave, his Marines fighting through Draxian compartments in brutal close combat. The Draxians were larger, stronger, and in their home territory. But humans had trained for ship-to-ship combat for generations, and they fought with a ferocity that shocked the Draxian crew. Derek's team reached the command deck in 18 minutes. Zethus stood with his command staff, weapons drawn. "Surrender," Derek said simply. "You've lost. Draxians do not surrender our flagships to—" Derek shot the deck beside Zethus's feet. "I wasn't asking. You can surrender to me, or you can explain to your overlord how you got your entire crew killed for pride. Choose, now." Zethus looked at the human's eyes and saw something that made his combat instincts scream warnings. These weren't civilized warriors engaging in honor combat. These were predators who decided you were prey. He dropped his weapon. The Iron Dominion's surrender broke the Draxian fleet's morale. Seeing their flagship captured, they began retreating. Human ships pursued, destroying or crippling 12 more vessels before Callahan ordered his fleet to hold position. "Let them run," he said. "They'll carry the message back. The price of slavery just went up." The battle cost humanity dearly. The destroyer Reckoning was destroyed with all 340 hands. The Liberator lost half her crew. Every ship in the task force took damage, but they'd broken the Draxian fleet, captured their flagship, and sent an unmistakable message. As medics tended to wounded and damaged control teams worked to keep ships functional, Sergeant Nina Kowalski found herself in the Liberator's medical bay, her arm broken but her spirit unshaken. Prill, the young Kashari who'd been freed from Theta 9, sat beside her. "Was it worth it?" Prill asked quietly. "So many humans died today, for us. Nina looked at the young Kashari. When I was a kid, my grandmother told me about Earth's history, about all the times good people stood by and did nothing while evil happened. She told me the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. She smiled despite the pain. We decided to do something. That's always worth it. The Galactic Assembly convened again, this time with significantly different energy. The humans had just defeated a Draxian fleet 40-12. More importantly, they showed no signs of stopping. Overlord Kreth Vaxmoran appeared before the Assembly personally this time, no longer amused or dismissive. The human aggression must end. They have violated sovereignty, destroyed property, killed thousands of Draxian citizens. The Assembly must intervene and force them to cease these illegal operations. The Palaxian ambassador, reading the political winds, cleared his throat. Perhaps a compromise. The Draxians could agree to gradually phase out their labor programs over, say, 10 cycles. This would address human concerns while respecting Draxian sovereignty. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. It was reasonable, diplomatic, the kind of solution that let everyone save face. Shim, present at this session, felt his heart sink. 10 cycles. In 10 cycles, his species would be extinct. But what choice did he have? He was one small being in a chamber of empires and powers. If this was the best humanity could achieve, he stood to accept the compromise. Admiral Callahan's voice cut across the chamber. No. The Assembly turned. Callahan had attended this session personally, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from the Battle of Draxus Secundus. What do you mean, no? The Palaxian ambassador asked. This is a reasonable compromise that addresses— 10 cycles is 3 million Kashari heartbeats, Callahan interrupted. My children do not have 3 million heartbeats to spend in slavery. No species does. He walked to the center platform, standing beside Shim. The Kashari were right to reject this compromise. If the Assembly accepts it, you're complicit. You're saying slavery is acceptable as long as it's phased out slowly enough that you don't have to watch. You cannot dictate terms to the entire Assembly? Overlord Vaxmoran snarled. I'm not dictating to the Assembly, Callahan replied. I'm speaking directly to you, Overlord. Here's Earth's position. Every Kashari gets released in 72 hours. All of them. Every facility, every ship, every compound. In 72 hours, if there's a single Kashari in chains, we jump to Draxus Major and start dismantling your capital world until we find them. The chamber erupted in chaos. This was insanity. Draxus Major was the sovereignty's capital, defended by hundreds of warships, orbital platforms, and millions of soldiers. Humanity couldn't possibly— You're bluffing, Vaxmoran said. You don't have the forces to assault Draxus Major. Callahan smiled. You're probably right. We'd likely lose. A lot of humans would die. He leaned forward. But here's what you need to understand about humans, Overlord. We've fought wars where we knew we'd lose. We've charged into battles with no hope of survival. We've burned entire cities to ashes to stop tyranny. And every single time, we've decided that some things matter more than victory. He gestured to Shim. These people matter more than victory. So yes, we might lose. But we'll make sure you lose too. We'll turn Draxus Major into rubble. We'll broadcast it across the entire galaxy. And when we're done, everyone will know exactly what happens when you enslave people and humanity finds out about it. The Assembly will never support this. We don't need the Assembly's support, Callahan said flatly. We need coordinates and a target. Everything else is optional. Ambassador Fletcher stood. Earth's position is clear. We will accept nothing less than immediate unconditional release of all Kashari. The timer starts now. 72 hours. Choose wisely. The session ended in chaos, but the message was delivered. Humanity wasn't negotiating, wasn't compromising, wasn't asking permission. They were stating terms. Overlord Kreth Vaxmoran returned to Draxus Major and convened his military council. The humans were bluffing. They had to be. No species would risk annihilation over a few thousand primitives. But his intelligence reports told a different story. Human ships were already mobilizing. Every warship Earth possessed was forming up, readying for the assault. They were actually going to do it. Can we defend Draxus Major? He asked his military chief. Yes, but at significant cost. The humans fight like madmen. We'll win, but The officer hesitated. Casualties will be severe, and they will damage the capital, possibly extensively. Acceptable. Overlord, if I may. The science advisor, a cautious being who rarely spoke, raised a trembling claw. I've analyzed human history, their wars, their conflicts, their cultural records. There's a pattern. When humans decide something is worth dying for, they don't calculate costs, they don't negotiate, they simply act regardless of price. So they mean every word. If we don't release the Kashari, they will attack, and when they attack, they won't stop until either they're destroyed or we are. There will be no middle ground. Vaxmaran stared at the analyst. His entire existence had been built on calculation, on understanding power dynamics. But humans didn't operate on those dynamics. They operated on something else, something he didn't fully understand. Pride warred with pragmatism. He could defeat the humans, probably. But at what cost? And for what? The Kashari labor program was profitable, but not essential. Was it worth watching human ships rain fire on his capital? The timer ticked down. 68 hours, 67, 66. The human fleet assembled at Rally Point Theta, 3 light-years from Draxus Major. Every combat-capable ship Earth possessed was present, 89 warships carrying 40,000 personnel. It was humanity's entire military strength committed to a single battle. Admiral Callahan stood on the Indomitable's bridge, now fully repaired and upgraded. Around him, his officers prepared for what might be humanity's last battle. Fleet status? He asked. All ships report ready for combat, his executive officer replied. Weapons loaded, shields at maximum, Marines ready for planetary assault. Callahan looked at the tactical display showing Draxus Major's defenses, orbital platforms, defense fleets, planetary shields. It was formidable. They might actually lose this fight. He thought about the Kashari, about Prill, the small child with dead eyes who'd learned not to hope, about Shim, standing alone before an assembly that didn't care, about the thousands still in chains waiting for rescue that might never come. Sir, receiving a transmission from Draxus Major, communications reported. It's Overlord Vaxmaran. He's offering to negotiate. Put him through. Vaxmaran's reptilian face appeared on the screen, his expression carefully neutral. Admiral Callahan, I propose we discuss terms. Release the Kashari, Callahan interrupted. All of them, now. That's the only term that matters. We are prepared to release them, but we require assurances that humanity will not pursue further aggression against the sovereignty. We need guarantees, time to organize the transfer, compensation for lost. No, Callahan's voice was flat. You have 12 hours remaining to release every Kashari, not 24, not 48. The ones you've already held for hours past my deadline, 12. After that, we jump to Draxus Major and you find out how serious we are. You cannot expect us to simply, 12 hours, every Kashari, free, or we come and free them ourselves. Callahan leaned forward. And, Overlord, if you've harmed any of them in the last 72 hours, if you've tried to hide any, if you've done anything except prepare them for release, then those 12 hours become 12 minutes. Test me. The transmission ended. For 8 hours, nothing happened. The human fleet waited, weapons hot, crews at battle stations. Every minute felt like an eternity. Then, at hour 9, Draxian ships began broadcasting on open channels. They were transporting Kashari to designated release points, unarmed vessels, carrying freed slaves to neutral zones where human ships waited. Captain Rafi took the Liberator to the first pickup point. When Kashari began boarding, some cried, others sang, their voices still damaged but filled with joy. They couldn't believe it was real. Shim was among them, freed from a holding facility where he'd been taken 3 days ago. When he saw human Marines, he collapsed. We're here, Sergeant Nina said gently, helping him up. All of you. We're taking you home. How many? Shim asked. How many did you save? All of you, Nina replied. Every single one. 17 at 283 Kashari liberated from 17 facilities. Not one left behind. Shim wept. The aftermath of the Liberation War reshaped galactic politics in ways the Assembly still struggled to comprehend. Earth refused to apologize for its actions. The Draxian sovereignty, humiliated but intact, withdrew from several Assembly committees and began restructuring their economy away from slave labor. The Assembly passed the Kashari Resolution 6 months later, formally condemning slavery with enough exceptions and qualifications to be meaningless. Humanity voted against it, calling it toothless political theater. Instead, Earth established the Callahan Doctrine. Any species facing systematic enslavement could petition humanity for protection. No assembly approval required, no political calculation, just coordinates, confirmation, and a promise that humans would come. The galaxy split in its response. Some species saw humanity as dangerous vigilantes who ignored established order. Others saw them as the only ones willing to act when action was needed. Shim called them saviors. The Assembly called them reckless. The Draxians called them Deathworlders. Humanity didn't particularly care what anyone called them. Prill stood with Sergeant Nina on Kesher Prime, the Kesheri homeworld, watching human warships patrol the skies. The Kesheri had requested human protection, and Earth had agreed. For the next 10 years, human ships would ensure no one touched the Keshari again. "What if the galaxy turns against you?" Prill asked. She'd grown in the months since rescue, her crystalline skin regaining its natural luster, her voice healing. Nina smiled. "Then they'll learn what we already know. Deathworlders don't lose wars. We just find new things worth fighting for." 8 months after the last Keshari was freed, Admiral Callahan sat in his office reviewing reports when a new transmission arrived. Another species, the Minhari, were being systematically enslaved by the Korthax Dominion. The Assembly was aware. They were forming a committee to study the issue. The Minhari were sending desperate pleas into the void, hoping someone would hear. Callahan read the report twice, then opened a channel to Fleet Command. "Prep the task force. I want full combat loadout and departure in 36 hours. "Destination, sir?" "Korthax space. Looks like we've got another lesson to teach about what happens when you enslave people." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the Assembly will condemn this action. We could face sanctions, isolation." "Let them condemn us," Callahan replied. "Meanwhile, prep the ships. We've got people to save." The transmission ended. Within hours, human warships began mobilizing again. The galaxy watched with a mixture of fear and awe as humanity prepared for another war that everyone said they shouldn't fight. But in the outer colonies, in refugee stations, in places where assembly law didn't reach and the powerful preyed on the weak, a new saying spread among those who had no voice. "When no one else will come, call the Deathworlders. They always answer."